welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining me tonight is Elissa Ayadi, the global head of social media at Spotify. Elissa began her career managing recording studios and artists before transitioning to the startup space. As an early employee of the original gaming YouTube network, she helped them become the second channel in history to cross 1 billion views. She was also a foundational employee of The Audience, the first multi-platform influencer agency working with creators like Madison Beer and Baby Ariel. And prior to joining Spotify, she oversaw the fan engagement and digital marketing department at Warner Records for artists like Dua Lipa, Saweetie, Omar Apollo, and My Chemical Romance. And in her current role, she oversees Spotify's social handles, including Spotify, Spotify Podcasts, Rap Caviar, and more. So it's so great to have you here. Elissa, how are you?
I'm good. Funny story, or I guess funny fact. The channel that beat Machinima to 1 billion views by 3 days was Rihanna because she is
Wow.
an unstoppable force and always has been.
We love Rihanna over here. Awesome. Well, with that, are you ready for question one?
I am.
Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give her on a personal note? And what one piece of advice would you give her from a business perspective?
Let's see. On a personal note, besides keep dyeing your hair, which clearly is advice that I've taken, on a personal note, I think I'd remind her to like rest and chill out and take breaks. I kind of came up in the music industry in the early 2000s in the dark times where everything was, not going so great for music. And hustle culture was a huge thing. So the idea that like you never stop, you do absolutely everything, you just keep going. So I never took breaks, I never slept, I never took vacations. So kind of reminding myself to like take a break, don't burn out, it's okay. That's a very kind of important personal, I guess, and professional piece. And then on the professional side, I would tell myself that music is not a straight line. I started my career as like a recording studio manager, an artist manager. And then again, music was not doing so great. So I took a left turn into the startup space, not necessarily because it's what I wanted to do, but because there were no jobs in music. And at the time, I called my mom crying. I thought I was never going to work in music again. And I was like, oh my God, this has been my dream and there's nothing here. I'm not making progress. But now, however many years on, it's ended up becoming a real boon that, I worked in gaming, I worked in the startup space, I worked with influencers. I've had, a lot of experience in all of these arenas that have kind of come into play in my career now. So that was a learning that I always try and pass on is like, you know what, it's not a straight line. It's not you get a job at one company and stay there for 25 years and end up the chairwoman. It's a really indirect path and it's not always in music, and that's okay.
I think you bring up a good point, and especially with like your background touching so many different areas and so many different industries, I feel like right now the music industry like covers all of the things that you worked in. Like gaming is a huge part of the industry now, and influencers, it's all there.
Yeah, it became like so valuable, and now where I am, I can tap into all of these like different things that I know. So on paper, if you look at my LinkedIn, it looks so cool and so thoughtful, but at the time I just needed a job to pay my rent, and that's okay. Like you end up kind of putting those skills together.
Yeah, it all works out. So I'm curious to know when you made the jump from the label side at Warner Records to now being at Spotify on the social side, what's been the scariest part of that and like the most rewarding part of that?
It's funny, like I was at Warner for 6 years, so it's been a minute since I started a new job, and having to go from knowing everything and someone could ask me a question and like 99 times out of 100 I would have the answer or know someone who did, to like how do I log into my email, just
Yeah.
relearning the basics of an entirely new company. That's always a little bit scary, but the really rewarding thing is one, realizing again that like your skills transfer, because you always have that moment, both I guess in a job that you've been at for a moment, but definitely to start something new, like, oh my God, am I any good at this? It's like, okay, all right, I'm good at this. It's okay. But really, making the sort of new friends and the new connections and that sort of deep relationship that comes with working anywhere, but especially in the music industry, like it's just a joy to work with people that kind of share your passions and share your values. So that's the
Mm.
exciting part for me.
Question two, every industry has its dirty little secrets, and you and I both know that it's no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it can be good. What's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say it's sort of a secret and it's sort of not, but like the whole concept of that it is about luck and timing more than it is about talent, that is 1,000% true. Every job that I've gotten has been in part because I like to think I'm good at what I do, but it's also been that I happen to be looking for a job while that company happened to have the job that would be right for me open, right? And for every time that has happened in the industry or even in my career, there's been times where I've been looking for a job and there was nothing open that matched me. Or there's been times when companies have come and said, hey, absolutely love you. We'd love to have you come work for us. I'm like, that's nice. I'm employed. I like where I am. So it really is luck and timing is so much more a part of it. And again, that's okay. Like that's just a part of how life is, accepting that that's a part of your career and it does not, detract from your skills. It does not detract from your career path. It just means that it's going to be, harder to predict than, hey, this is just going to be a straight line. It's okay.
And I feel like sometimes that can happen, like you don't realize it in the moment, but then years later you look back and you're like, oh, yeah, that was like probably the right thing at the right time.
Totally. And it happens at multiple times in your career too, where like there is that moment that's just a total pivotal, oh, hey, this fell out of the sky and it perfectly aligned. And then there's always the opposite of like, again, working in the dark times of the music industry, seeing all of the record labels collapse when, I had a band that was getting ready to sign to a label that got, shut down the next week. There's all of those moments. And that's just part of how the world moves, and part of how the industry moves. And the pandemic's a great example, right? We all had to pivot all of our lives with this thing that you just absolutely could not predict. And that kind of chaos it's okay. It can be a bad thing, but it can also be a good thing. But no matter what, it's there.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Okay, here we go. Final question. Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked plenty of questions, whether for industry conferences, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, there has to be one question that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would be your answer?
Ooh, that is a good one. I'd say non-work skills, right? So you get a lot of like, what's the skills that would make you successful in this job or X, Y, and Z, but what's the stuff sort of outside the being clever or problem solving that really helps you succeed? And for me, it's being kind, right? Like this is a relationship business. It's all about who you know, how you interact with them, do they trust you? And it's really, it's easy, especially when we're stressed out, people can get snappy, but being kind and being kind up and down the chain, when you're first starting out, the people who are almost the most valuable to you are your peers, your fellow interns, your fellow assistants, the people who are just starting out, because that's going to be the class that kind of grows with you. But once you've been doing this for a minute, like continuing to be kind to everyone around you, I don't know. One, it just makes the workday way more pleasant to work
For
with people
sure.
who aren't jerks. And it's an easier and faster way to build trust. If people know that they can come and ask you for feedback and you're going to give honest feedback in a way that like you're not being a jerk, you're trying to be helpful, that you're just, you're good to work with, you're positive to be around, you'll be brought into way more projects. Sometimes projects that like you're nowhere near ready to be in, but you can learn, right? So
Mhm.
just taking that, I'm going to be a decent human to everyone around me. It actually resonates so much louder sometimes than like the super skills. There's
Mhm.
a comic that I read when I was a kid that was like, you're thinking about, do you want to take the super genius into battle, but he's kind of a jerk? Or do you want to take like the kid that is just there to like rescue his little brother? You want to take the kid that's there for the good reason. So that's always how I've kind of thought about building a team and conducting myself in the workplace too.
So I'm curious to know, what would you say to someone who, let's say, they're like the nicest person ever, and then they had a horrible week and they made so many mistakes and they feel like they ruined their entire reputation? Is there coming back from that in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, it like Well, one, it depends what you've done. If you've done something truly terrible.
That's true.
Um, but if you sort of built that foundation, right, of, you've been a kind person, you've sort of built up that trust, you can even kind of say in the moment, like, hey, you know what, Rachel, I'm having a really tough day. I'm having a really tough week. Can I get back to you on this? Can I just have a little bit of extra time? And if you've built that trust, if you've built that sort of compassion, people will give you that grace. And then same thing if you've made a mistake, owning up to it. Like, hey, you know what? I did this, totally thought I was in the right, and I actually kind of fucked up. I think this is a solution, or actually, Rachel, I don't know. I really need your help to figure out a solution. Like, you have that trust, that the other person knows that you're not coming from a bad place. You're not coming from a exploitive place or a cruel place. It's a lot easier to build trust on a foundation of kindness. It's hard to trust someone who's just a jerk and throws things and slams doors and calls you names. Like, you're not going to trust that person. But if someone's been, kind and honest and forthright, and they come to you and they're like, oh my God, I'm having a shitty day, or I made a mistake, you're going to trust that that's genuinely where they are, and help them out and extend yourself, because that's not going to harm you, more likely.
Great advice. Well, Elissa, it has been such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, this has been great.
And to everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Stay tuned for next week, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking 3 powerful questions. See you next time.